So thanks, Lenny, for joining me today in the IFI. We'll just start by talking a little bit about your upbringing.
Sure.
Sorry.
I was born into a kind of very pretty secular Jewish family in the mid-60s, and so my upbringing was a pretty conventional middle-class Dublin, with the one difference that the family wasn't Catholic, and my dad's a lawyer. My mum stayed at home, looked after the kids, 3 sisters, myself. Went to high school, which was near where we lived, and I suppose the family, there was a really real kind of interest in art in the family, music, literature, painting, and so to that extent I was exposed to that. Nobody really talked about film as an art form, because that wasn't part of the picture.
Was there an interest in watching film, like on Sunday morning, would everyone kind of crowd around and watch kind of the old classics or anything like that, or was it?
Well, I watched a lot of films. I was sort of obsessed with the telly, and tried to spend as much time in front of it as I could. Like I was that kid who got up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday, waited for the kids' programs to start, and but no, it was people watched television. My mum watched a lot of television. My sisters did. My dad didn't. He was always he was never that interested in TV. And there was a love of good mainstream films, but there wasn't but nobody watched sort of what you would call nobody watched European cinema or anything like that in the house.
I get you. So from there then you went on to Trinity into philosophy, is that right?
Yeah, so I studied philosophy in Trinity. I started off doing sciences and doing maths, physics, and I gave that up and changed to philosophy and did a degree.
Lack of interest, or was it just that
it was
not your calling, say?
I think it wasn't my calling. I mean, I liked it in school, and we had a really good physics teacher and good science teachers generally, and so
that can sway your opinion.
Kids were encouraged to do it, but also I think I thought doing physics was going to be more about the philosophy of it than it turned out to be, and I just sort of learned that my interest was conceptual generally, and I started to realise that I sort of picked the wrong thing, and I changed, but I really enjoyed doing that degree. But while I was in college, I started to mess around with video, which was just about becoming affordable. We raised money in the college and set up a kind of filmmaking society.
Well, that was going to be my next question about the Trinity,
Trinity Video
and that
company.
with Guiney, was that kind of the, say, core of your experience there? Like, did you spend a lot of time making video outside of the sciences, or?
Yeah, no, because I started philosophy at that stage, and it was we did a lot of it. I mean, a few friends. One of the people that I'd been in sciences with, and he still is a physicist, but he still has an interest in making films, and he was one of the people as well. And we just started playing around. I mean, there was nothing. We didn't. I'd like to say that there was something that we made that was really amazing, but there wasn't. But it was It was just the beginning of that time when you could take a camera and go and shoot.
Well, I guess if there's no regulations, you can do whatever you want, can't you?
Yeah.
You kind of just experiment
Exactly, and there was nobody. Before that, you had to. I suppose people were making Super 8 stuff before that. Yeah. But this was the first time you could shoot something, go and stick it into a U-matic machine, edit it, and look at it. And so we did a fair bit of that.
Very cool, very cool. Your first short was Three Joes, is that right?
That's right.
Did that come during your time in Trinity? Or?
It was the year we made it. The year I left. So there was this. I don't know if you remember, but
probably not. I wasn't alive, I'd say.
Yeah, but you probably weren't. Jesus. The film Educating Rita, which was with Michael Caine, and it was like a sort of big popular film in the 80s. Before I was I think it was before I was in Trinity, they made it, and they used Trinity as a location, and they paid a location fee, and that money was put aside to help fund visual and performing arts.
Ideal.
So we got like 2,000 old money and borrowed a bit more and made a short, Three Joes, the year I left. And that was the first time I had any experience of having a proper crew, real equipment,
of course,
shot on film, all those things, and worked with, like, the filmmaking community in the country was so tiny then. So, in fact, the people that worked on that short were John Moore worked on it, PJ Dillon worked on it, lots of people who are still, Hugh Linehan was actually the first AD, so he's like
mad.
the guy who edits the culture in the Irish Times, and so it was funny. There were, anyway, everybody did it for nothing, and we made that film, and that then I went off to. I was kind of in two minds about what to do, but I got a scholarship to go and study more philosophy in the States, and I went off to do that. And while I was there, Three Joes won some prizes. In the best.
Dominic West is in it, isn't he?
Yeah, Dominic
How
West.
How did that come about?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, that's another thing. And Michael Murphy, he's a superb actor. And Gary Cook from Après Match.
Yeah. It's like, was that just perchance?
Yeah,
that
Gary Cook was in college. So was Dominic West.
Yeah.
He came from Britain and went to college in Trinity. That's how I met him.
Okay.
So he was just this great young actor that was in Players.
So of course you're going to take a great young actor to win your first film. Of course.
Exactly.
Ideal.
So after that, it won Best European Film at Cork, and it won prize at Oberhausen, which is a big short film festival in Germany, and other prizes. And I just thought at that point I was sort of feeling lonely and working in, I was at Stanford in California, and I just thought, no, I want to make films.
Yeah.
And that's when I chucked in the academics and started trying to.
That's literally what sparked it, like in terms of.
Well, it was just I was wasn't particularly happy there anyway. It was the spark that made me think, yeah, I'll do this.
Did you honestly believe at that point you could set out and make a career for yourself? Or you were like, oh, I'll go back and just kind of chance my arm? Or
I think I would have said yes, but I probably didn't really believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, I'm glad I didn't know as much then as I do now, because I might not have done it. I mean, in this, or put it like this, I was looking at these recent statistics the BFI released about how many people who make a first feature go on to make a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth, and then the numbers are tiny. So even if you get to make your first film, which is already hard,
very good achievement, of course.
I think after that only 1 in 10 will make a second.
Really?
And then after that maybe 1 in 10 of those will make a third.
Christ.
So
That's
it's
mad,
really, really tough. But that's not. I think I just thought, I don't know, because if I was a different sort of person, maybe I would have stayed in the States, tried to do something there.
Yeah.
But I had no support network there. Wouldn't have known where to start. Was still really young, so came back here instead.
It's mad how those things work out, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. I'm still hoping to make a career out of it.
Philosophy, just teach the filmmaking. Mendel Walsman, is that right? That was actually shot here in the Irish Film Institute, wasn't it?
It was shot downstairs.
1987, is that right?
Yeah, which is pretty.
So was that at the beginning of, say, the Trinity kind of video club?
Yeah,
or?
so what happened was, I think we did that while I was still in college, and it was the first thing we shot on film. So I can't remember whether it was before we set up the society or after, but it was the first thing we shot on film, and that was totally amateur in the sense that there were no professional crew working on it at all. But it was about my grandfather, and who I just wanted to record his stories and his memories. He grew up in Poland and between the wars, and had an amazing, just sort of had a journey through that Central European history, that extraordinary phase of history in Europe, and ended up bizarrely in Ireland. And he used to tell us all these stories when we were small, and I, like all kids, thought they were boring. And
then as you get older,
you
learn to appreciate them more.
That he's actually been in like right through the kind of knot of Europe, of European history at that point, and his family as well. So I did that, and we got reversal stock from RT that was actually half was out of date. So half the film was all orangey and the other half was all blue. And we couldn't grade them together, so we had to decide that there would be at one point in the middle of the film where the colour would switch, and that would be it, because you couldn't intercut them.
Yeah. That's very funny. So you'd come back from the States, and then you went on to directing commercials. Was that soon after you came back, and how did that come about?
It took a while. I came back, I started writing, and I was and still am very critical of the stuff that I wrote, and even though some of it was supported by Arts Council, which was no film board at that point.
Of course, yeah.
It was between the two film boards.
92, the film board.
Yeah, exactly.
Said it, wasn't it? Yeah.
And so I was writing stuff and throwing it away and and feeling just I'd made a really bad decision, or it just wasn't going to work, and I think something in me knew that I really had to get up and start making stuff. Like, for example, if you're a writer, you can just write. But as a director, if you want to get better at it,
got to be working.
You've got to be working,
directing,
and so and because I knew I just needed to kick up the arse, I needed something dynamic to happen, and not just be getting up every day feeling depressed and sitting at the desk.
Yeah.
So I very naively thought I'll just make some TV commercials, and then you discover that like
on your own account, like your own kind of.
No, I thought I'll go out and get loads of work.
Oh, I see.
And then you realise that that's quite hard because it's a really lucrative thing to do. So obviously lots of people want to do it.
Yeah.
But I did it. I luckily met this guy Johnny Spears, who was a producer. Who took a flyer, and we did a demo commercial that he paid for, and that got me work, and actually became pretty successful at it.
Which one was that? What commercial was that?
Well, that was a demo, so that was for no real product. It was for a newspaper. But the first real commercial I did was for the lottery, and then one for Aircom, and then I was very quickly into quite big budgets. Carlsberg, Guinness stuff,
Very interesting.
Which I learnt a lot from, I have to say.
That's Johnny Spears and still Spears Films. They still do a lot of commercials.
They do a lot of commercials, yeah.
Ed Guiney. Tell us a bit about Ed Guiney and his kind of, like, was he with you throughout that process of the commercials and all that, or did he kind of jump back on board for the films?
Yeah, Ed was not. No, what happened was when we left college and I went to the States, Ed kept going in film, worked in different companies, and then eventually set up his own company. And so we had I wasn't working with him because I was just too busy trying to write my stuff, and he was getting on with like making things and doing real work. And so once I started working in commercials, now that was entirely different. That was just with Johnny. And in fact, the first film came about through Johnny. So Adam and Paul came about through Johnny Spears because he met Mark O'Halloran.
Okay.
And said, well, do you ever write anything, not just for theatre, do you ever write for film? And would you ever be interested? And he said, well, I got all these different ideas. And he chucked us some ideas that he'd had. And that's when I met him. And Ed came on board as an exec on that film. And then that reignited our partnership, and then we kept going.
So that actually leads me to my next question, which was about Mark O'Halloran and his relationship and his writing, especially if you were struggling with writing.
I needed somebody to work with. And actually, Mark is not just that. He's a great writer. He's an amazing actor as well. In Adam and Paul, he's fantastic. He's great. Yeah. He's absolutely fantastic. And so we met, and I had read this little sample of these characters, Adam and Paul, and Mark had sample scenes and an outline, and the sample scenes were I just had that music that you hear and still in the film, in the way that they talk to each other, in the way that dialogue works, and I was really interested in slapstick. I'd always loved Laurel and Hardy, and felt the way to do this film is to play on that sort of precise vaudeville style, and not to try and make something grittily realistic.
Yes.
And so we talked, and we both kind of got excited about how we were talking about it, and the thing we worked on together was the outline. So we changed the story radically, but the essence of the characters, how they spoke, some of the key scenes were there right from the beginning from Mark's writing.
Interesting. Okay. Still on Adam and Paul, Tom Murphy. He obviously passed away in 2007. What was he like to work with? And
Tom was amazing, and he is a massive loss to generations of people who would have been able to see him continuing to develop as an actor. He was actually in college. I think he was a bit below me, a bit younger than me.
Okay.
But I remember seeing him even as a student and thinking he was incredible. Both himself and Dominic West stood out massively as actors from that time, from when they were really young. I mean, Tom had acted as a child, but
because Tom did a lot of theatre as well, didn't he? He won a Tony, didn't he?
He did. Yeah, he won a Tony. Amazing. I mean, he's amazing, stage actor, but an absolutely brilliant, delicate, tragicomic player. Just an absolute pleasure to work with as well.
Yeah.
So I loved working with him, and it was just devastating to everybody when he died. I think particularly to Mark, because they were
two of them
brothers.
Are impeccable. Like, I mean, and Paul, they work so well off each other. It makes it funny because, like, I mean, as you say, if they were gritty and kind of it wouldn't work. Like, it's just,
and yet it can't be silly or sentimental. It has to be real in a different sort of way. But the other thing about it is, Mark, in fact, wasn't going to play that part.
Oh, really? There
was another actor who pulled out about 4 weeks before we started shooting. Right. And who I won't name, and but Mark stepped in, and in fact, what was going to happen early was that it was going to be that other actor playing Mark's part and Mark playing Tom Murphy's part. And then we auditioned Tom, and he was so amazing. Mark was kicked out, and then Mark ended up coming back playing the other
Back
part.
in as a substitute. That's mad. Mad how things happen. Can I ask you a question now, kind of away from your own work?
Yeah.
The Arts Council have recently made cuts to the Cork and Galway film centres,
Yes.
to 40-50%. How do you think that kind of affects not only Ireland and the filmmaking scene, but also kind of grassroots filmmaking in Ireland?
I mean, I think all the cuts are having have and must have a profound effect on artists, on audiences, on big challenges actually to work out how to make. I mean, the cuts are going to get made because, and I think there's a big job in lobbying to make those cuts as small as possible, and the campaign for the arts is doing a really good job, and as are other people. But trying to work out how best to support the arts in this country, both film and generally, given the situation that we're in and a likely level of funding into the future, is massive task and challenge. I think the Arts Council, to be fair, are doing their best, and I should say I'm involved in this panel in the Arts Council that's kind of trying to give some guidance as to how to best go about arts funding, given, and not just funding but policy.
And that's good, and that's important for people, I think, to know that as well. There are actually filmmakers involved behind the scenes of the Arts Council. Actually. Yeah,
it's not just...
it's not a bunch of execs kind of saying, oh, get rid of that, get rid of this.
No, and actually I have to say that the people working in the Arts Council are, I've discovered, incredibly committed to the arts, and they're working under unbelievable, really difficult situation. I think it's easier for me because I'm not directly funded by the Arts Council, in that any funding in Irish funding would come via the Film Board or tax incentives and stuff. So I can be a bit objective about it, but I think there is a bigger question. It's not just about funding. It's about a broader policy towards culture in the country, and what sort of vision for, in particular around ideas like participation and audience development, and how we kind of create a culture which really values the arts and in which people are encouraged to participate and not just consume whatever products coming from the big cultural players internationally, but really get involved in the cultural world here.
So do you mean kind of in terms of homegrown kind of drama, something like Love, Hate and that sort of stuff, and actually distributing that?
But also just audiences and educating kids into
wanting to see Irish cinema.
Exactly, and wanting to think about their own culture as something vibrant and as something which is, which you can talk about, and that's a world that I think that the more you are involved in education, and not in some sort of, it has to be done really well, because otherwise, many generations of Irish people have been turned off the Irish language by really bad teaching. Yeah. But I think there's an opportunity now to think, and I think agencies like the Arts Council and generally artists in general should be driving cultural policy in the country, not just leaving it up to the
Do you think that's something that's kind of not easily doable, but I suppose
think
possible to do through kind of collaboration and communication, and something that will just happen over time through generations?
I think there has to be a really clear policy decision and very concrete steps, and lots of different agencies and organisations have to buy into it. I mean, there are some models in other countries where involvement has really risen due to just kind of policies directed particularly at young people in schools, and which get people involved in the arts, or at least to be aware of the existence of that discussion. And also it's about being really tough, I think, in making some very tough decisions about funding, about what is. And of course there will be huge debate about that within the artistic community. And
it's obviously hard. You have constraints anyway on yourself, and then you have to put other constraints on other people.
Sure, I mean, I'm not going to, the thing is that we're just talking, so I thankfully don't have to make any of the big decisions, but it is.
That's like good to know that your input is there as well,
Yeah, I mean, it is important, I think, that there are artists involved in it, and it, as you say, it isn't just a kind of executive-driven thing,
It's just a funny one. You've obviously been on set countless times. Any stories that kind of jump out, or anything mad that's happened, or?
Oh, lots of stuff. I mean, it isn't. I mean, making a film is a sort of. It's a delirious experience. There's a lot of delirium because people are really tired, and the stress level is extremely high. And plus, there's this kind of thing that happens. It's a bit like Blitzspirity, where you form this this amazingly intimate family that lasts for the number of months that you're making the film, and then it's gone. And I think everybody who works in this sort of world or in theatre or whatever experiences that like intensity of relationships that are sort of, so it's a series of like, you know, community one night stands. And but you hopefully don't come out of it feeling like you said anything, feeling like dirty in the morning, you know? So I probably, I mean, God, everything you do is, everything is. I'll come back to it because if we talk about particular films, I'll get into thinking about it. But do you remember in Adam and Paul, like, Mark and Tom were so authentic that they couldn't go into like a shop and buy cigarettes or anything. Yeah, they always had to have somebody from the set with them, some nice middle class person from the set.
So that shot inside in the Spar is actually genuine. Like you just went in as a hidden camera sort of thing.
Well, there are some shots in the film where they're like begging on the corner and stuff, and then they're just doing it. And nobody knows.
Oh, really?
Yeah. All the O'Connell Street stuff is too big to close down if you're a little film like ours.
Yeah.
So that was all just shot from a distance on long lenses, and you get these kind of observational glimpses. And then some of it isn't, but it looks like that, and then most of it is properly set up. But yeah, if they weren't to just, you know, with Tom Murphy was particularly funny because he'd go in and he'd say, you know, the guy would say, look, just don't even walk in, and Tom in his best sort of D4 accent would say, well, actually, I just want to buy, and you could just see this kind of massive clash in the shopkeeper's head of who is this guy? I can't make sense. But also we got like lots of people on the street would come up, like junkies on the street would come up to him and say, how did you get into this filmmaking business? I mean, they were they really passed
living cast, like, yeah. I have a friend now who every time he goes into Brown Thomas, he'd kind of dress up in a tracksuit as much as he can. He'd take out a wad of like 60 50s and like buy a present for his girlfriend, you know, just because he enjoys that kind of like.
That's great. You know, I could do the tracksuit bit, but I wouldn't have the wad of 50s just at the moment.
Oh yeah. So if you weren't going to be a director, what would you be?
I would probably be an academic, and I don't think it would suit me. Yeah. But that's what I would have done, I think.
One of these deeply unhappy people that kind of goes along with their lives. And
no, I mean, I think it's, you know, I think that I probably would have. I think I would have written in some way, whether it was academically or fiction.
Okay.
I can't imagine.
Do you feel you're a writer deep down?
Yeah, I do, and I still write. And actually, my you know, I'm going to do some of the stuff that I write. That's my kind of promise to myself at the moment.
Cool.
You see, I tend to be very involved in the writing of the films anyway. You know, whether or not that's something that's reflected in the, you know, in the credits. I like the way I work as a director and the way most kind of non, you know, gun for hire directors work is to be deeply involved in the development of the project. You don't just come in and shoot the script. You are intimately involved in the creation, framing, kind of essential finding of that film. So
do you think that's a very different process? I mean, when you are getting a writer on board, obviously they're professional and they're very good, but I mean, is it something deeper if you've written the project yourself, and is there an easier connection, say, when you actually are shooting?
I don't know, because I think you have to feel you own it by the time you shoot it, whatever way it started. And I've always felt that when I've made something.
You've never felt it's someone else's project and I'm working on it, it's your project?
I've always felt by the time I'm making it that I've remade it for myself in some way. But I think if you write, probably it's more difficult, because I think I can be very ruthless about a script.
That's probably a good thing, because otherwise you're not going to have your own definitive.
Well, exactly. I mean, but whether you could be as objective about your own material. But I mean, there are plenty of scenes that I will have put into a film. Yeah. And when I shoot them, I don't feel any different about them than the ones that I didn't.
They all kind of mesh together into being. Yeah. You see. Obviously the Oscars were on last night. What sort of contemporary cinema interests you? Did you have much of an interest last night?
I didn't. There was nothing I was particularly interested in last night. I haven't actually seen 12 Years a Slave, which won Best Film, so I can't really comment on that. And I haven't seen...
She was trying to avoid the old Oscars. That's my fault for bringing up the question.
Oh no! I can't believe you're trying to do non-spoiler on the Oscars the day after. That's impossible.
No, it is. I'm going to do it.
I just said to upset you.
I won't say anything else about what won an Oscar.
List them off.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's interesting that like 4 of the nominated films for Best Film were adaptations, and my next 2 projects are both adaptations of books, and there's a reason for that. In a way, it's like it's part of the way the industry works, that it looks for these pre-existing things that it can say, okay, there's a how would you describe it? There's provenance there. You know, something is done well. Something is, you can read it and you can know what it is. And it's so those projects are. It's interesting that, like I say, so many of the Oscar-nominated films were adaptations. I don't think the Oscars represent the best films made that year. I mean,
but I don't think anybody does. Think? Yeah, no, definitely not. It's just a big
well, I would say, you know, I would be very surprised if I've only seen a little bit of it, but if Paolo Sorrentino's film The Great Beauty isn't better than any of the English language films that were nominated in the main category. But yeah, I'm mostly I like a lot of American cinema. It's amazing how good stuff still slips through the studio. Well, it doesn't come through the studios, but still slips through the net of a pretty conformist industry. But most of the stuff that I like is European or from other parts of the world. That, you know,
and do you get to see a lot of that? I mean, at different festivals, festivals you're showing at, or do you make an effort to kind of see?
I never see other films at festivals because you're always
press stuff,
doing stuff. But I see a lot of stuff on DVD. I'm in the European Film Academy, so I get all the box of all their films. I have a subscription to one of the Hulu sites, and that has all the Criterion collection, and so I just obsessively watch cinema, a lot of old cinema, but I try to watch. So I'm quite interested in directors like Bruno Dumont in France, and a director who's interesting, although I'm not really. Well, I like, for example, Ceylan, the Turkish director, and so there are a lot of really fine filmmakers working.
And do you ever watch work like that from European cinema and kind of look at a style or pick something from those and kind of say, I'd like to do that, or that's something that interests me, or that's different, or, you know what I mean, kind of find inspiration from those films?
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of the way I work is probably and the aspects of the films I make. And the funny thing is, you do discover, like, I just made this film called Frank, which on paper is very different to anything I've done before, and yet when I look at it now,
just you wait and get into it.
Well, you know, other people look at it now and say, they sort of see it as part of the same stable of films, and that's, I think there are things in it, and that's interesting. You look at the screen and you see the mirror and you see the things reflected back again that you didn't even know you were really putting into the film. But lots of who I am as a filmmaker comes from the watching I did when I was a teenager and through my 20s, and that was how I clarified my ideas about film. But also from the world. I mean, film is not just about film. You know, how you relate to the world you're in and what your experiences are. If those things translate into the work you do, then that's the most exciting thing of all. Not that you are. I mean, the Tarantino idea of cinema is that, you know, his films are about other films. That's all. I'm not saying good or bad about that. It's just the way it is. But
your films have a realism to them, like, you know. So I suppose if you are going to be grabbing realistic,
well, you're trying to
then
get into something. You're trying to, for me anyway, trying to penetrate something. And if that's the case, it's not just about the creation of the beautiful object. It's also about that object's sort of semantic relationships to the world, and so those interests and kind of impulses, which are deep down in the person's personality, sort of precede, I think, the experience of watching other people's films. But definitely, there's work that I respond to, and that has definitely influenced the way I work as a filmmaker.
Would you say you have a definitive style? Is there anything you'd say, like, I do?
I don't think there's things I think when I look at my own work. I don't think a person is always the best judge of their own work or the best person to describe it. But there's a sort of humanism in what I do, or a kind of, it seems that the characters are usually. I tend to do this thing of projecting a weight to characters that feels like it exists outside of or you know, in a way more substantially than is on the screen. So the idea that what you're looking at is a kind of projection of somebody real rather than a construction of the film. And there are stylistic things. I don't think my stuff falls into a very easily categorized
definable kind of
genre, but there are parts of it that seem to just keep coming back, and tropes that continue to come out in
I guess
films.
you know what you like as well, and I suppose that was going to come out in terms of what you
Yeah,
like.
and in terms of the way people perform and what I'm not a big fan of drama, for example. I don't really like
High octane.
Yeah, I don't, and I don't like film which is primarily psychological. You know, so there is a. I mean, I would hope that over the course of the films that I make in future, that those ideas will become refined and explored. So, and the good thing is, I don't have to do the categorization part. If anybody's interested, they
Leave
can
that
do
to
that.
the critics, yeah.
Yeah.
So Frank, we touched on it already, but in terms of it being different, say, from what Richard did, is it very different? I mean, it's a lot of comedy in it, isn't
massively
there?
different. I mean, on the surface, it is. You couldn't get anything. You couldn't get a bigger contrast. Frank is a kind of. It has a sort of huge playfulness about it. It is kind of self-referential in ways. It's joyful in large part, and it is also and so there are it moves between some really out and out slapstick stuff to quite quiet, poignant, simple human stuff as well. So again, it's a film that's really, really hard to categorize. It's I think one thing that's hard to argue with is that it's quite a fresh film.
Okay.
I don't think you'd have seen anything quite like it before.
Well, that's good, isn't it? That's nice to be able to.
Yeah, I
say
think
that.
so it's turned out that. But yeah, I mean, and I mean, go for it. Ask me anything you like about it, and I'll tell you.
Oh, really? Wow. What could I ask you about it? Well, I suppose in terms of the cast, when you were casting what Richard did, I think you did a lot of kind of. I know because I was supposed to have an audition for it.
Oh, yeah.
But casting through the schools and stuff like that.
Yes.
I mean, it was a very different process to have LA actors and
Yeah. I mean, I went from a film where all the actors, or almost all the actors, were young, starting out, really excited to be in the film. Probably slightly in awe of me because I'd made some films that they would have known before that, and that means. I sort of am in the sort of daddy role, and that's quite nice because it just allows you to when you want to really talk about what you're doing with the cast, you can. When you'd rather just like stay a little bit distant and get them playing and see what happens, and you can sort of make those calls yourself very quickly and quietly and change your mind and do what you want. When you look at Frank, the casting process is very different because you don't audition.
Of
big
course,
names.
you
You offer them.
Yeah.
And that means that you are.
Well, I did a lot of research, I guess.
You do a lot of research, but you also don't know until you start.
Yeah.
You really don't.
And do you get to meet them? I mean, do you?
Yeah, you meet them.
You meet them, have
I mean,
coffee, whatever.
so in fact, there are all sorts of different.
It's intriguing now because I have no idea how this process works.
Okay, so the way it works, and it entirely depends on both the actor, where they are in their career, how sort of famous they are, how bangable and all that stuff, but also what sort of person they are, because some of those actors will be much more open than others. And then it depends on where you are in your career. So if you're Steven Spielberg, your relationship with that actor may change. For me, what often happens is people meet subject to an offer, meaning unless we end up having a fist fight on the floor, we'll meet, meaning that if it doesn't go really badly, there'll be an offer to follow. Okay. Right? But auditioning, no.
Oh, was there that sort of thing? I mean, were there people that you met that you were like,
no,
God,
actually,
I just couldn't work with this person?
No, actually, so say with Maggie.
Yeah.
I wanted that Maggie. That she was my first choice for that role. So, in fact, everybody, honestly, was first choice. But with Maggie, she initially refused. We met. I went to Brooklyn. We sat for half a day. And we chatted, and she thought, and she just really couldn't get her head around the script. She said, I just can't. I don't know. And she said no, and I was kind of pretty disappointed. And then I still hadn't come up with anybody that I really wanted to give it to. So I was wondering, coming back through an airport, and I got a phone call from her saying, I've changed my mind and I really want to do it. Is it still available? Oh. She just read it again, thought about it, said she couldn't get it out of her head, and said that she's never done that on any other film. And but with Michael, we met. I had actually done a commercial with him.
Yeah, he was in the Guinness one, wasn't he?
Yeah, years and years ago.
Yeah.
It was actually MasterCard, but he's drinking a pint in it.
Oh.
But that was a long time before.
But did you know him? You know him from circuit kind of
Oh,
stuff?
but only from around then. I don't think I'd met him since. And then suddenly, a few years before Frank, suddenly he started appearing in all these films. I remember thinking, God, that guy from the MasterCard commercial is doing really well. And then suddenly he was doing really well.
And suddenly he's getting an Oscar nomination.
Yeah, exactly. And he just liked the script, and we met and got on really well, and talked about it. And I think what's happening in those conversations is you're both sort of testing out the other person's idea of the project to see are you making the same film. And I think the one thing that is a loss to the director is that in terms of my own process, the auditioning phase is really useful.
Yes.
Because when you hear your script played, you kind of know how it's working, and you actually learn a load about the film by auditioning
People
different
that
actors.
take up different types of doing it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and you see, oh wow, that's such an interesting way to play it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not right, and that person may not be right, but I've learned something by watching them.
Is that something you consider? Would you consider, I'm sure it's very unconventional, but actually workshopping it with actors and then still going off and getting your names?
I would. Pretty painful for the people that you work
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Don't tell them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, one of the things you can't do either, because one of the options would be to audition actors at a level who will audition, and that can be some quite famous people, but just not the super famous. So audition actors who will audition. But actually, if the big name actors hear that you're doing sort of bigger, they're less interested as well. So,
of course,
for example, you can't go and meet like 20.
Showing off.
You can't go and meet like 10 A-listers.
Yeah.
For the same part. They won't do that. They may have a meeting. Some actors will have a meeting even without the promise of an offer, but only if you're maybe meeting 2 or 3 people. That might be the limit.
That's mad.
It is a mad, unbelievably mad world, and it's where you spend an awful lot of time. I'm casting another film at the moment, and you spend an awful lot of time in that, chatting with the casting director and producer and other agents about whether such and such a plan to meet this person, but also have a Skype call with this person, and but you're sending that person the script, and you're proposing not to send that person the script. How will that be? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Will their agents talk to each other? Will they know? It's just mad.
Neil Jordan once said that he needs to sell a film, and to do that you often have a lead actor.
Yeah.
I mean, is that something that you consider for Frank? Was it kind of like, okay, well, we better take that step up and bring in leading actors, or did you feel that was a jump you wanted to make?
Well, you're always aware. I mean, anybody says they're not aware of that is not telling the truth. You're always aware of the fact that, I mean, a really, really good sales agent, for example, will be able to look down a list of actors and tell you what you can raise in pre-sales for each actor, given that script.
Yeah.
But a really, really, really good one of those people will also tell you not to make your casting decision based on that information. So I would rather make the film for less money with the right person than the wrong person than get a bigger budget.
Of course, yeah. So
on Frank, the lucky thing is that we do have an actor who's got a very high profile, but he's also the right person for the part. There are scripts where you look at them, and you know, one of the things that I now do when I see a script, and I do it unconsciously, really, is that I'm going, that script cannot be made for less than X, which means that I would have to cast one of the following 5 names. And if that person isn't right, then I just would say I can't make the film because I know we won't have enough money to make it the way I want to make it.
Of course, yeah.
So,
well, I guess it has to be a step up every time you do a project as well.
Well, I don't know, because I think it's important not to think of it as a simple
not a ladder,
upward curve,
but I mean,
you know, because like sometimes some of the ideas
you want to challenge yourself.
I mean, I think that there are some projects where the idea demands certain scale, and so you're just going to have to accept that will be primarily cast driven, unless you are one of the 2 directors or 3 directors whose name is enough, and that is becoming increasingly hard now. It's not in Europe, maybe more so, but globally, it's all about the actors in terms of what people are prepared to invest, and they may be wrong. Maybe the audiences are probably smarter than that, but marketeers and execs aren't. And they will play it safer and say, no, we just won't take that risk. The only way we're going to spend that amount of money is
get Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah, exactly.
George Clooney, yeah.
So for me, like in thinking about the upcoming project, those issues,
Room,
they do play a part, because the sort of money that you can probably raise will differ. But I also know that the only way the film will ever be good, maybe you could raise the money with the wrong actor, but you're going to get shot in the head in a much bigger way later on if it's not good.
Tell us a bit about Emma Donoghue's film. You sent her a 10-page letter, didn't you?
Yeah. I didn't think it was 10 pages, but apparently in the States, double spaced is standard. So I thought it was a 5-page letter, but
much more reasonable.
Yeah, I mean, so I read Room about 3 years ago, and I really had a very vivid sense of how I would make it and that I wanted to make it as a film. And just kind of against the odds thought that this was pre what Richard did and pre-Frank. So I had 2 films behind me, both very small art house films, which she happened to really like. And I wrote her this letter, and she said it was the best thing she'd read about the novel. But her advice from her people, and probably her own instinct, was that I was too green a director to give the film the profile it would need, even if I would make it really well.
It's interesting, yeah.
So we just kept sort of in touch, and apparently she said that she got offers from extraordinary people to make the film, but she kept saying, I just wish that guy who wrote
Lenny
that
would
letter
just get that
was a bit bigger, and then because he sort of really gets it.
Yeah.
And so they didn't give the film to anybody else, and meanwhile my profile started to rise. Yeah. Particularly after the announcement that Frank was happening, and her agent just said to her, you know that guy you keep talking about, well, it's not such a crazy idea anymore. Yeah. So we met and got on, and immediately got on extremely well, and so she's adapting it and we're working together, so yeah, it's been a good.
And is that in a kind of pre-production sort of stage now?
Well, it is heading that way. Yeah, we're casting, so we're
working on the script as well, and
working on the script, continuing to cast. Once the main adult cast are in place, we basically start the clock. We set a date. Well, you have to finance the film.
Yeah.
It's a small business of financing it, but I think the film is very financeable given the
profile and your profile.
Exactly, and the novel's success. So, but once you do that, you put a start date in the diary, and then that gives you X number of months to cast the child. Because you would think, oh well, surely you find the child first, because what if you don't find the child? But you can't find a 5-year-old and then wait a year to finance the film.
Of course,
because so in fact you have to start the process, turn the egg timer over, and then hope that you find the right child in that time. So that's pretty.
And that's True Element again as well, isn't it?
That's True Element. Yeah, it is. And it's with there are various partners in it, but it'll be the first sort of purely North American thing that I've done.
Okay.
Even though Frank is partially shot in the States, it's
completely shot in North America, is it?
It's completely shot in North America. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm just going to jump back there. I meant to ask this a minute ago about the kind of Frank Sidebottom character that Michael Fassbender plays in The Head. I'm sure you've been asked a million times, but I mean, was that difficult if you are getting in someone like Michael Fassbender, and then he's...
Well, I think that's what appealed to him,
He liked the idea. Yeah,
because that's always been there in the script, It's the most obvious fact about the film, is that you've got this guy in the head for the film, and so, well, part of the playfulness of the film is because the film talks about what it is to do make authentic work versus work which is designed to be consumed in a certain way. And part of the playfulness of the film is that you take, like when an actor becomes famous, their face becomes a sort of separate commodity to them.
It's a tool. It's like
Exactly. So what if you take that thing away, and you take away the thing that, because the film is, in Frank in the film is the band in the film is sort of, heroically uncommercial, and much as Frank himself in a sort of strange way thinks they should be more commercial, it's sort of Daniel Johnson kind of territory. And the Jonah Gleason character really doesn't see why they shouldn't just try and be successful and use they get famous for all sorts of bizarre reasons, and that he tries to leverage that into kind of proper audiences for their work. And you realize that you realize that eventually as an audience that this is not the way to go, that they should just they have no option but to stick to what they're really good at. And so what we do in the film is, the film itself could have been way more commercial. Like you could make a film about a rock star played by Michael Fassbender. And at least on the surface, that film is much more marketable than a film about a guy who wears a fake head. But
maybe not though. Maybe
but this is it. Yeah, this is the paradox, because paradoxically, you can't stop that process, because the fact that Michael Fassbender wears a head in this film becomes a story to tell about the film. So the film plays with all these ideas, which are also true of the film itself.
From a kind of technical aspect, in terms of art department and makeup, I mean, was it a challenge for him to stay in a head for 12 hours a day or whatever?
No, because the head is really, it's not high tech at all.
Yeah.
I
imagine it had like kind of metallic things that were keeping his head kind of away from the structure.
No, it's got a really simple plastic cap that sort of fixes to his head, but you can take it on and off in like 30 seconds.
Oh, really? Okay.
So he could pop it on and off. He actually kept it on quite a lot, because it forced him into a certain way of moving that is really great, because you can't really see out of it properly. You can only see out of like one eye at a time.
It's nearly theatrical.
It is. I mean, yeah, he has to do Frank using all his other kind of skills, not just his face. And but it's really low tech. I mean, it's much more Blue Peter than it is, Lucasfilms.
Yeah. As a director, who do you think are the most important people to connect with on set? Like, do you think it's important that you have a kind of rapport with, say, DP, directors,
everybody really? Even one bad person, one person who's not really committed or not pulling their weight or just isn't very good, has a massive. It's like a film is sort of the sort of financial and scheduling end dictate that there's never any spare capacity. It's not like you've got...
like what you said about the family, I guess, in terms of everyone being tight-knit.
Yeah, and if somebody doesn't fit that, it's very hard, and it can be really destructive and disruptive. And also, everybody's expected to work at sort of 90%, because if anything falls below that, it just starts...
90%? Why 90%?
Well, I don't think anybody can work 100%, but what I mean is that people are working hard and intensely all the time they're shooting. And if somebody slows it down, that has this massive knock-on effect. So, but I think the important relationships creatively are with the cast, with the director of photography. That's the fundamental relationship between on the crew side.
Your DP has changed, hasn't it?
Well, I've used the same person. I've used the same group of people quite. Yeah. I mean, James Mather shot Adam and Paul, and he shot Frank.
David Greenan shot.
He shot what Richard did, and Peter Robertson shot Garage. And actually, I've worked with Peter and James on commercials as well.
Okay.
And Dave, Dave took a sort of flyer with him, and it worked out brilliantly on what Richard did, because I just really liked him. I mean, he really got it. And James, James is, I love, but he's a great director in his own right, so he isn't always around as a cameraman. So, but that was great. That relationship is crucial, and anytime you've got a tension between the director and the cinematographer, you just have hell.
Goosed, yeah.
Yeah.
Jumping back there, sorry, I meant to ask this earlier as well, about Prosperity.
Yes.
And 4-part drama for television. Is television something you'd kind of like to pursue again? Do kind of something like, I don't know, Breaking Bad or...
Well, I'm interested in television not primarily as a director, but as a kind of... as a way of... I would like to... I sort of half doing it at the moment, thinking about some ideas that would be good for long form ideas.
Sure, yeah.
And then I'd love to be involved in setting them up, creating, being involved in creating the idea and the world and running that end of things, and maybe directing the first one. But I think after that, I think the director has much less interesting involvement in television than they do in film.
What about these? What's the actual term for it? For example,
showrunners.
Yeah, showrunner. I mean, is that something that would appeal to you?
I think you'd have to devote your life to that.
6 or 7 years.
Yeah, and I don't know if I will do that, but I am. But there are some ideas that I'm interested in. 2 ideas that are floating around that I would be very involved in working on in a sort of conceptual way early.
Sure.
And then maybe take an executive role in that as it goes on.
Yeah.
But you'd probably need somebody to run the show, otherwise you just wouldn't be able to make any films in that time.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in doing work that doesn't always involve
from a writing perspective, isn't it? I guess you could always write.
Yeah, exactly.
That's something you wanted to look into.
Exactly.
Do you feel your other interests, or what are your other interests that kind of influence not just your film but your life? I mean, do you have an interest in sports, music?
Yeah, I mean, I listen to a lot of music, and I still like reading work that has got nothing to do with gospel adaptation or whatever. So those just the usual old-fashioned, model of the cultural life still appeals to me. And so I read and I listen to music and I talk to friends and people who I'm interested in. But I have young kids, so I don't have much time. And part of the thing that's difficult is that you get onto this kind of treadmill when things go all right for you as a director, where actually the thing you most wanted starts to happen, which is that there are lots of projects. And it's very hard to retain space just to think, and I suit laziness and kind of pottering. I like to potter. I think it's very healthy
as an inspirational art form.
Yeah, exactly. Just when I say potter, I don't mean actually, I mean like just get
no,
up.
not pottering as in being a potter.
But get up in the morning and not have anything to do.
Yeah,
and that doesn't happen anymore, because actually you don't even get up in the morning. You get like dragged out of bed by your children.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get a handle on how that might.
Find I might
do that.
Yeah,
exactly. But there's also the imperative to make work and both kind of psychologically and also just keep the whole show on the road financially. So those pressures don't go away.
You did that in 2004, didn't you? It's 10 years now, so since then. You've done 4 feature films.
Yeah.
You're about to do a 5th.
Yeah.
Are you going to look at kind of doing more feature films?
Yeah, I think
churning out 2 or 3 a year kind of thing?
It will speed up now. I think your maximum is like 1 a year.
Okay.
So what I was doing was sort of, if you look at it early on between Animal Pole and Garage, it was like 3-4 years.
Yeah.
So now actually it has got faster. So I would hope that I would be making a film a year for the next few years, or every sort of 12 to 16 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And then try to build time in for writing and pottering and generally all that stuff and but introspective. Yeah, that's it. I mean, the introspective life is the thing I am most naturally kind of drawn to, and I think it's the thing I have the most talent for, is just thinking kind of in that unconstrained way, and that filmmaking is a funny art form in that it is, but I think it's kind of important to me as well. I think if I only was doing the introspecting, I can get very bleak.
Yeah.
But the fact that you've got to fly around the place and
I guess you got to have a business head on you, don't you? And
you have to have a really you have to have a sort of managerial head on you, which is the weirdest thing. But but you have to be able to inspire people, and you have to be tough, and you have to be convincing, and funny enough, doing ads and stuff. I'm very good at pitching stuff. From doing it a million times for commercials, and so going into meetings and persuading people to part with money and trust you and all those things, I kind of get a kick out.
Very important, I think. I think a lot of people kind of ignore that side of things. They're like, "Oh no, I can just make my films," but it is vital. I guess
it is
the
really vital.
Helped you in that kind of.
It is vital. I mean, especially if you. I think people are different. Some people really don't. It doesn't suit them, and they have other people that they work with, and Ed is massively involved in all that part as well. But the capacity as well to just hold it together on set, and if there are people, you're asking a lot of people, and they have to believe in you, and that can be achieved in lots of different ways. There are very, very quiet directors, but it doesn't matter how you do it, but people have to believe you.
Yeah.
And want to work for you.
I guess you have those kind of quiet leaders on like the football pitch or whatever, as opposed to kind of vociferous kind of Roy Keane.
And there are people who are really aggressive, and I think that maybe is the only way they can do it. I don't think, kind of gut feeling is that you don't get the best out of people by being like that. But it is one way of pushing things in the direction you want. Yeah. And the only thing you're really obliged to do as a director is know what you want and push together.
Well, this is my next question. I was talking to a very good friend of mine last night, and we were at your talk at the Sharks in Kinsale.
Yes.
And you were kind of saying that, to the DP, he's kind of seeing the shot, and he's kind of saying, "Oh yeah, no, it's beautiful, and that red's lovely there," whatever, and everyone's kind of slowly kind of pushing you over the cliff,
Yeah.
And I suppose, is that something you need to be very careful of, that you see all of the images in every picture,
and you can't want to please people.
It's in your head,
Yeah, you have to take all that other stuff and And sometimes, like at the beginning, I would have thought that you just sort of walk on set and tell everybody what to do. That's not necessarily the best way to do it either. Especially with cast, sometimes it's better to just say, just run it, just run the scene. I'm not going to say anything. And start to watch it and then make very simple, small suggestions about what might change. And then as it starts to emerge, then the actors will see where it's going and start to find it. That can, for certain actors particularly, that is much better than going in and saying, okay, you walk in over here, you say this, you know, and
you're
then
feeling very angry.
Yeah, exactly. And the really important thing is not to overload with those sorts of psychological directions.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you know, you get all that, you see it all the time, and you know, you're angry, but you know, you're afraid to, and as I always say, you can't play that. That's a paragraph of stuff that you can't possibly play.
Yeah.
Whereas, so if you try to find metaphors for it, or just tell somebody, just tell somebody very simple, like just do that again, but play it really low energy. And if that's a good direction, they'll find, oh, this scene feels different. It gives me a different power in the scene if I don't say much, or if I say what I say very quietly.
Yeah.
And give them physical things like that to touch off. Because if you start with a big treatise on the character's feelings, you just, I mean, we can have an interesting debate about it, but that's not necessarily going to end up as a very real scene.
Especially on a set, like.
Yeah, well, exactly.
In what Richard did, there's a lot of improv. I mean, is that much the same kind of thing? Did you kind of say to the actors, this kind of reverts back to what you were saying about these kind of Hollywood actors and younger actors. I mean, did you trust them to kind of just go ahead with it and make the scene for you? I mean, especially Jack in terms
with
of
improv, actually, there are really only 3 places that are improv in what Richard did. Like, there were 3 scenes where we kind of knew that would happen. But that was very much known from the beginning.
Okay.
So they were just written in the script as they talk after.
Because you workshopped a lot as well.
Yeah,
we
workshopped a lot. Yeah. So in fact, I didn't just let them go off, because I think improv like that tends to be not very good. You know, actors tend to run towards conflict.
Yeah.
If they have no other option, if they have no other, they'll look for tension, because that's what makes it. You know, well, at least if I get into an argument, I kind of know what's happening in the scene.
Yeah.
So what we did actually is we really constructed those improvs around ideas. We practiced them. We knew the territory they were going to go into and where it was going to, like how we were going to move between different ideas. We just didn't write the dialogue, and we practiced it, so the actors were really familiar with those scenes. So it's like a kind of directed improv, because otherwise you just end up with a bit of a mess, and you see that all the time. I can't bear it. I hate that sort of. And you know that people walk away from that stuff. Exactly. And they walk away from it congratulating themselves. They've just done something really authentic, and it just looks like pants on screen.
Who's your favourite director?
I don't have a favourite director. I mean, historically...
I'm going to ruin my question now unless you give me a specific director.
Okay, I'll tell you, I can give you a few people. I mean, they're not surprising. There's a director I absolutely love, Bill Douglas, Scottish director. He's long dead and amazing. You know, I love lots of Pasolini and Bergman and Tarkovsky and all the canon of great
classics,
filmmakers. But I also love Cassavetes, and I like some much more mainstream stuff as well. So if I had to pick a director whose films I could watch again and again, it might be Bergman.
Okay. So why did you make What Richard Did?
I made that. I can tell you the how, and then the why sort of comes out of that. The how was that Kevin Power wrote this book, What Richard Did. Kevin Power wrote this book, Bad Day in Black Rock, and it was floating around our office in Element Pictures, and Emma Norton, who's the head of development at Element, her husband is Mal Campbell, who's a writer. And she said, here, read this. He read it, really liked it. He talked to Ed. Ed first optioned the book. Ed read it and liked it. And then thought, what should we do? And Mal read it and liked it. And then Ed said, would you read this book? You might be something in it for you. And I read it, and I wasn't sure, but the character of Richard just kept stuck in my mind and sort of changed a little bit in my mind and softened a bit and became this way for me of reflecting on what it's like to be the one that everybody loves, which is always, you know, we make teen movies about the outsider, and it's just really interesting to think about the vulnerability of the one on the top. And I went to a school that was not a million miles away from those schools, and I knew people like him, and I just kept thinking about it. And so one of the reasons I was worried about making the film was the connection to the Annabelle's case, because I didn't want to add more suffering to people who'd already suffered a lot. Yeah. But I felt in the end there was something very important to be talked about the expectations you place on people like Richard. And also there are many cases like the one outside Annabelle's. Yeah. And what we did do was fictionalise much further than the book, to the extent that I don't think
it's obviously important for them, but it is devoid.
And so that's why I felt it was I could stand over it morally to make the film. But the sort of the artistic why was to study the character of Richard. That's why I did it.
That just brought something else into mind there. Garage ends not ambiguously, but it ends indefinitively, say.
Yes.
And so does what Richard did to a degree.
Yeah.
I'm dying to see Frank, but does that end in the same sort of thing? Is that something you like doing because you kind of like to leave the audience thinking at the end, or?
Frank has a more resolved ending.
Okay.
Than
Frank. I suppose you kind of say Adam and Paul also has.
Yes,
a kind of
and actually, Adam and Paul is much closer to Frank's much closer to Adam and Paul than any of the other films in that it has that playfulness.
Yeah.
But it's much less grim, you know. But you know how things end for the characters at the end of Frank. Whereas the whole idea of Richard is really to ask yourself, did you ever know that boy? And it's certainly not possible to know him there, I think, at the end of the film, and that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Whereas in Garage, I think there's an attempt to at least whisper the idea of freedom at the end of Frank, at the end of Garage, even though you know Josie is dead. There's a sense of release in a very austere kind of way. But in what Richard did, I think there's that ending is very dark, really, because it says perhaps he feels nothing, you know, after all this. Perhaps he is unaffected by it, and that's very scary. And it also,
because that's what stuck with me. I mean, that final shot where he's sitting there and he's just pondering, and you're like, he could just as easily be thinking about his college work rather than anything that's happened.
It's that, and I was looked for it so long to find that moment of pure ambiguity at the end of what Richard did.
Yeah.
Because
did you shoot? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did you shoot many endings? Because there is the sense that film is edited 100 different ways.
That's good. That's good insight. It's true. And not that there were different endings. We did shoot an ending, but we didn't go as far as that ending. No, put it like this: the way the film ended on paper was in the university, and what was going to happen was that he was just going to pass himself and Lara were going to pass each other in the corridor and not even acknowledge each other.
Okay.
And that was shot. The scene that we did end on, where he's sitting at the kitchen table, was initially just part of the lead up to that, which was to say he's in college, he's studying, you see him in different worlds, sort of continuing. But I kept going back to that shot because it felt much more pregnant than the other ending, which was a bit more obvious, you know, that oh wow, they're not, they don't even acknowledge each other.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that for that film to have any real depth, it has to be about things other than how did it turn out for him. And it certainly couldn't be about the court case or anything, because that's a whole different thing, you know.
Another film.
He's not a real guy, so whether he's convicted or not actually doesn't matter to me. Unless it's a film about the court system or a film about the justice system or a social commentary, which it isn't. Then those things don't matter. What matters is what state as a human being might he be in at the end of all this. Did he really feel? Does he feel? Or has he managed to sort of successfully repress this?
And what do you think? Do you know? Or, do you leave it to the audience and you know yourself and don't say? Or
I think that for a character like that, I think that Richard ultimately is a very kind of weak and kind of lost character right from the beginning of the film, and that what you end up with is a sort of hollower version of that, and that maybe in later life a character like that all of that emotion will re-emerge, but I sort of imagine that he would successfully have a fairly conventional middle class life, which, I mean, you know, to go back to those real cases, and the one that most people know most, the Annabelle's case, people are out there who are living probably married with kids and stuff, who
life must go on, of course.
Who were involved and nobody ever knew about.
Yeah. I guess we'll go back to that question. Who's your favourite director?
I'm gonna. I mean, because it's a totally meaningless answer, I'll just pick one of the directors I love. I'd maybe Bergman, because of the kind of just the number of his films which made such a profound impression on me.
And what would you ask Bergman if you were here?
I don't know. I think if he were in a kind of talkative mood, I'd just ask him lots of very, very practical questions about the journeys he made on various films and how he did things and why and his process, because process is the thing that you become most obsessed about as a director. Other directors' process, and I'd probably talk to him about things not related to, because he was such a. I mean, his films really do illustrate the point I made earlier about making films about life, not films about films. I mean, his films are deeply about his attitudes to the deepest aspects of his own experience, and so I'd like to talk to him as a person as much as a filmmaker.
I guess we've kind of already done that, so it's okay. I think that's it, unless you question it. Go on.
You used the word pregnant there, and there is this kind of a sense to your films in that when they end there is a continuum, because we leave it unresolved. Is that something you're conscious of?
I think it's a bit like I said about character. I'm very interested in what it is that makes something feel real, not in the Lochian naturalistic sense, but I mean in the sense that I think you always have to feel there is something behind, around, as well as other than the film, which is speaking into the screen. Okay. Otherwise, all you're looking at is a construction. Now that's an illusion. It's like three-dimensional drawing, where you give the illusion of a third dimension, because of course all you have are these images, and all you've done are, you've constructed everything, you've made it and put it, so I'll go back to something that Bergman said, which is, he says that really great filmmaking has the quality of dreaming, because in a dream, even though you're in fact the author of all the things you experience in a dream, it feels like it's coming from elsewhere. It feels like you're experiencing something real.
It's a lovely analogy.
And so for me in filmmaking, I'm always sort of, whether I'm conscious of it or not, striving for that idea of of the third dimension. And if you've done it, I think if you've succeeded at all, then when you leave a film, you feel this kind of like the ringing that you still have in a room after a bell stops. You feel that there's something that existed outside it. And I'm also really fascinated about how you get into scenes and out of them. So you don't feel like, I'll give you an example. If you look at the Hannah Arendt film, right? It's just been out recently, which is about the sort of philosopher journalist Hannah Arendt. It is just a series of little dramatic nonsenses. Now it's about lots of important stuff, and so you can still learn about the world through it. But you can hear cut and action. You can feel the and go. And always I'm trying to enter scenes in a way which makes you feel, hang on, this has already started, or I'm coming in upon something that has a life outside.
You're dropping in.
You're dropping in, exactly. And I think if I'm good at anything, it's about preserving my kind of ghostly, my sense of some ghost reality, even though I'm constructing the scene. I still can step away from it when I'm watching the actors and feel it as if it was really happening and make those judgments, because not always, and sometimes you don't succeed, and sometimes you're so constrained by a million things that kind of level of involvement artistically is very hard to find. But that's the challenge, is to feel yourself as a director, even though you're looking at a monitor, you're surrounded by people with clipboards and and there are lights it's about to be lunch. You still have to be able to kind of get outside that and really experience it. And I have said before that your job as a director is to be the human being in the room that just experiences what these other human beings are doing, so that you're not, and at the same time you're also the one who's going, if that person walks in on the left and we're going to be a cut, and so that stuff has to become sort of automatic enough that you can be doing the mechanical stuff but still kind of pop into the room like some innocent kind of bystander going, oh, you know, why is that person doing that? Doesn't feel right. You know, that doesn't feel right. Why? It doesn't mean anything, or it does.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to preserve some part of yourself that is like an unprofessional human that's present, and not like a mechanic or even a sculptor. You're not always making. You should be experiencing as a director as well.
Well, that's one thing that always stuck with me from what Richard did. I mean, there's lots of points of dialogue where they are just chatting. Do you know what I mean? And it gives a very human feel to them. Just like, I mean, for example, in the pub when they're there, or even in the car scenes and stuff, you know?
Yeah, the gerbil and all that stuff. Now, some of that's just fortuitous. Like the gerbil story, he was telling that to her when they didn't know we were filming. And Jack sussed we were filming pretty quickly, but he sort of kept going.
Yeah.
But Roisin didn't know we were shooting. So, but in other occasions, you're constructing that, and the way to do it is to know that if I'm too close with them in the camera, or if the angle is too easy, that will be blown. Whereas I'll actually say start over there and say to the cameraman, I don't know when they're going to pop out, but just follow them and find them. That will give you that feeling that it's happening. But in dramatic scenes where there really is dialogue, then it's much harder. But you still are obliged to find that. And sometimes things need to happen that are unpredictable, that don't make sense. Sometimes you have to engineer mistakes in a weird way. A bit like types of drawing where the roughness of it is kind of part of its sense that it's real. You know, even when you're constructing sets, like if you look at any room, it will always have weird hangovers to previous incarnations with stuff that, like that pole that goes across there. Like if you were designing this as a set, you probably wouldn't put that in because you'd think, well, what's that about? Yeah. But that's the thing that would make your set feel real.
Yeah.
Very well put.
Can I ask
yeah, sure. I just want to check one thing about time, just in terms of, so I'm meeting somebody downstairs at 12. Fine. Go ahead.
Garage.
Yes.
I studied film for about 3 years, and one of my lecturers quoted it as his favourite Irish film, and it's actually my favourite Irish film. But we found out that he was from Mullingar, I'm from Tipperary.
Yeah.
And generally the rest of the people in the class that were from the country loved it, but the people from Dublin City didn't particularly like it as much.
It's really interesting, you know, because in a funny way, in terms of the audience for Garage is much more within the M50 than it was in the country. But as it's gone on, its resonance has been much more in the country, and I can kind of understand that. I think a lot of people in the city have a sort of reverse snobbery and would say, actually, oh, Ireland's changed. That's such an old-fashioned picture of Ireland. But you've talked to anybody who comes from those places, they will say there are towns like that all over the country.
You know people like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And why Pat Short? Because you've seen the stuff that Pat does before that, and then Garage comes along and you're thinking, right, here we go. And phenomenal.
Yeah.
Such a different performance from him that he's ever done.
Yeah. I mean, the reason that, again, that's another thing of instinct, because I had done TV commercials with Pat. So I had worked with the other Pat, you know, the Pat who's just been like outrageously over the top. But if you look at Pat, you talk to him, and if he goes quiet and he's just in his own world, there's a tremendous kind of tenderness to him and a sort of simplicity of expression, and he'll sit there waiting for you to go again, and then he'll be up and performing. But that thing is there. But now I'm not the first person, because Pat had done plays, and he'd done sort of Martin McDonagh, which is already a bit up, but he'd done plays, and I just, both myself and Mark felt that he would get it, because Josie is like the real version of one of the characters that he would play, and a lot of his character, I mean, when I say the real version, I mean Pat would play some sort of half sort of bizarre guy who worked in a garage and was great, thought he was funny. The thing is, you dial that down to like 0.2 from 10, and then you start to get towards that character. And also, he knows, because he was a man who came from from Thurles, whatever, but he knew people like that. So it was really like, had we gone with an actor like, say, Brendan Gleeson or somebody who you can imagine, I think you may have got a more actorly version. With Pat, you got this incredible truthfulness.
I think that was it, because myself and David are from the same town, and it was the first time you saw people like Josie was. There are people like that at home, and you don't see that often. Yeah, like, we don't explore that aspect of Ireland much, and especially at that time because it was it was boom period. So it was
that's right. Well, again, myself and Mark always seem to be like. We always seem to like be on the other part of the wave. Like I made the film about middle class Ireland after the bust, and I made the film about like the people on the margins when apparently we're doing so well. But actually, the thing I realised is those swings are really only in the media. I mean, actually, okay, a lot of people made a lot of money during the boom, and a lot of people are suffering during the bust. But actually, the main shapes of the culture are the same. And we were really aware during the Tiger that actually, like, you walk around Dublin and you think, so little of this has really changed.
Yeah.
So just perversely, that was why Prosperity was a thing we wanted to do at that point. Just say, well, come on, this is ridiculous. The idea that it was doing really well.
Yeah.
But similarly now, there's nothing. The core of the middle class isn't affected by the bust. But also, towns. It's not like the idea that every town in Ireland, every village in Ireland was transformed during the boom is so ridiculous. And so all you needed to do was drive around, and you found, like,
so
honestly,
much
in the town we shot where the garage is, there was a guy across the road who would
Where was that?
That was Rathcabbin in Tip, actually.
Yeah, it's North Tip.
Yeah. And then we went across the border into, like, we were in East Galway for other parts of the film, but like there was a guy who would sit on the wall opposite the garage watching us film, who had a blue baseball cap and never said anything and went really quiet when any woman went by.
That's
would sort of put his head down. And I mean, I don't know what he thought while he watched Pat, but it was like having Josie watching Josie.
Yeah.
As a final question, what advice would you give to any young filmmakers?
I mean, I would say it's not a bad time because there's a lot happening, and there are ways to do it. Like it's not as a sort of as wild a shot as it might have been before. I would say, I think a few things probably. Don't get too obsessed with one project because sometimes things have a time, and if they don't happen, and you're hawking it around for a long, long time, you can really lose. I think it's important to be continually developing ideas. The other thing is just to start making stuff because there's nothing to stop you now. You can make it on. And when you do it, take it really seriously and try and get the best people to work with. You can, even if you're funding it yourself. And I think the thing is, I would say, I don't know, some people say I don't know if you ever know at the beginning whether, I think the only way I found out that I was good at it was by sort of doing it and then going, okay, actually, I think I could have come out of the first stuff I did and gone, I'm not really for me. And I think, I don't know whether this is good advice or not, because we're always supposed to say to people, go for it, believe in yourself. Like, no matter how badly it goes, just stick to it. But I think there are loads of lives in filmmaking. And I've seen a lot of people get absolutely obsessed with being an actor. And you know that they may not be very happy with it, but they've invested so much in their belief that they must do it, and nothing else will do. And I would say, like, find the thing that gives you real pleasure, and don't get hooked on any idea of yourself at the beginning that you will then hold to the exclusion of everything else. So as a director, start making stuff. I think the worst thing you can do, and what people sometimes do, is they want something a lot, but they're a bit afraid that they won't be any good at it or it won't work. So they wait.
Life is gone.
And then it goes by. So instead, just do it. Start doing it, and you'll know very quickly or you'll learn really quickly about yourself in that context and whether it really is healthy for you or good for you or whatever. But I think, the thing is for directing is just start making things, one way or the other. And you know what the other thing to say is, there is no barrier, actually. People get really obsessed about it being who you know, and actually it isn't. I mean, you look at something that's good, and people will, like, jump. I mean, it's one of the few kind of worlds where nobody really cares whether you, like, wear a suit or whether you're talent is so much the premium thing that people. I mean, of course, if what you want to do is really unusual, then that's different. You may have to accept it being totally on the margins. But generally speaking, if you make something good, even if it's made really cheaply and on video and like with, you know, tiny resources, that will be recognised, and that's a good thing, I think.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much,
Thank
Lenny.
you
Not
so
at all.
much.
Thanks,
Thank
Lenny.
you
Not at all, no
for
pleasure.
connecting. Thank you.